want to thank everyone for coming and giving us a standing room only event tonight. This is fantastic. I'm really, really excited for everyone to be here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eric Kohn. I am the chair of America's Future Foundation Chicago. And hot mic. There we go. Thank you very much for coming. So if you're not familiar with America's Future Foundation, give me a moment to tell you a little bit about it. We're an organization for young professionals that we seek to identify and foster the next generation of liberty leaders here in the Windy City. So to take people who are already interested in these ideas of individual liberty and freedom and make them more informed and more persuasive communicators of these ideas. We have events once a month. We have, in just the last couple of months, we had an event on America's culture of alarmism, exploding culture of alarmism on things like vaccine paranoia and GMO foods. We have a really cool event coming up that I'll tell you about right now at the end of July, on July 30th. We have Steve Horwitz, who is an economist at St. Lawrence University. And he is going to come and give a talk. How many of you are familiar with the term public choice theory? Okay. He's going to come and he's going to explain public choice theory through the vehicle of the TV show House of Cards. So even if you don't know what public choice theory is, come and find out. To probably also get me to do my bad impersonation of Frank Underwood. You might very well think that. I couldn't possibly comment. So that'll be July 30th at Sullivan Steakhouse, like a block away. So. We're really thrilled for the museum to be hosting us tonight as well, and for the Arthur and Rupe Foundation for making tonight's debate possible. So the subject tonight is conservative and libertarian perspectives on immigration. And for that, I want to introduce our speakers this evening, our debaters this evening. First, to my right, physically, not politically necessarily. David Inserra is from the Heritage Foundation. He specializes in cyber and homeland security policy, including protection of critical infrastructure, as research assistant in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. In addition to co-authoring research papers, Inserra contributes posts on national security to the think tank's policy blog, Foundry. He also plans and coordinates all public events for the Allison Center. Inserra, who joined Heritage in 2012, grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Government and Economics from the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He and his wife, Kayla, currently reside in Arlington, Virginia. And if you're interested, the first thing that pops up when I try to Google your name is your David Inserra's salary. So someone's really interested in you. But hopefully the rest of that search should be larger, right? And to my left, physically, is Henrik Rasmussen. He's the founder and president of Rasmussen Public Affairs. He specializes in the strategic positioning of clients as global and local agenda setters. During his career, Mr. Rasmussen has worked with senior business leaders, policymakers, think tanks, and NGOs worldwide on a wide variety of issues such as agriculture, energy, financial services, healthcare, information technology, natural resources, and telecommunications. An active writer and public speaker, Mr. Rasmussen has appeared in numerous media outlets in the United States, Europe, and Asia, including the Chicago Tribune, the Financial Times, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, and the South China Morning Post, and the Washington Times. He is currently working on a book on corporate statesmanship and economic competitiveness. Mr. Rasmussen previously served as vice president at a global strategic communications firm based in Washington, D.C., where he managed comprehensive international public affairs campaigns for Fortune 100 clients. Born in Denmark, Mr. Rasmussen was active in Danish grassroots politics and served as a platoon commander in the Royal Danish Army before moving to the United States. Mr. Rasmussen holds an MA in political science from the University of Pennsylvania and graduated summa cum laude from Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia. He became a naturalized U.S. citizen of the United States in 2010. Please give him a round of applause to welcome. So the format for tonight's program is we will have opening statements from both of our debaters. rebuttals, possibly a second rebuttal from each, and then we're going to open it up for questions from you, the audience. And then we'll have closing statements. So previously, in a coin toss, we determined that David will be going first. So David and Sarah.
Thank you. The debate on immigration reform can be emotional, divisive, and complex. As a nation of immigrants, immigration reform is personal. Henrik's recent citizenship just shows you how personal and close it can be for many of us. And for the families involved in this process, it can be callous, unfair, and unjust. So at the start here, let's agree on 3 things. First, the system is broken. All parties agree on this, and no one wants to defend the status quo. Second, there are alternatives to comprehensive reform, which is so broad that it includes flawed and contradictory policies and incentives. Rather, we can separate the issues. We can look for common ground and vote up or down on each element of reform. An incremental approach really is better. There's no reason to bundle everything together and put it in a one-size-fits-all comprehensive package. We saw how well that worked with Obamacare. We need immigration reform that is acceptable to the American people and meets the needs of the American citizen and the immigrants that want to come here. Third, this is a passionate issue. It's easy to demonize opponents, but there can be reasonable disagreement. We must find answers that are workable, sensible, and practical. And we need the real deal. This can't be political pandering or some midnight deal that comes out of a back room somewhere. Immigration reform should bring out the best in our lawmakers and our citizens, and not tear us apart or try to taint the legislation with procedural trickery. We've seen enough of that. We need a careful conversation about reform, followed by an acceptable result. So in our search for common ground, we can agree on many things. We can agree that the free movement of labor is an important part of economic freedom. We both believe that the American welfare state discourages hard work, marriage, and success. We both believe that the core responsibilities of government are to maintain the rule of law and provide for the security and safety of its citizens. We also believe that, unlike many liberals, it is possible to have a rational disagreement without being a sexist, a bigot, or a racist. So now in our search for common ground, most Americans would agree that we can't just have completely open borders. There are real, substantial security concerns out there in the world. There are criminals, terrorists, militia members, and other violent individuals and enemies of America who would come here to do us harm. So this justifies at least some limitation, some system of immigration. There's also, however, a need for skilled laborers. Skilled laborers are attracted to our freedom, our entrepreneurial spirit, and our opportunities. We need to have a process that welcomes skilled workers and have them become a part of America's economy. There's overwhelming agreement on this point, and there should be, from whether you're left, right, libertarian, or something else. There's broad agreement on this, and there should be, because America's economic leadership requires new skilled workers. As China, India, Brazil, Russia, Poland, and other emerging markets continue to enlarge their economies, our economy must also grow and expand. There is no doubt that immigration provides many benefits, from a larger labor supply to more tax revenue. But what is the cost? This is something that we need to know. What is the cost? Some would argue that there are economic benefits from unlimited immigration of unskilled workers. That may or may not be true, but it ignores the fiscal costs in the long run. Heritage studied the fiscal costs and found that in the long term, the costs outweigh the benefits. Heritage research indicates that most unlawful immigrants and those with lower levels of skill will go on to consume more in government benefits than they pay in tax dollars, resulting in trillions of dollars in future costs, coming out of your wallets and out of mine. As Milton Friedman said, it is one thing to have free immigration to jobs. It is another to have free immigration to welfare, and you cannot have both. Along those lines, a blanket amnesty is wrong because it is costly, unfair, and it will not solve our immigration woes. In fact, it will only make it worse by encouraging yet another generation of illegal immigration. In 1986, the U.S. provided amnesty to about 3 million unlawful immigrants. And lawmakers promised the American people that this would be a one-time deal. Well, 3 decades later, and we have approximately 12 million unlawful immigrants. Amnesty didn't work then because it didn't solve the underlying problems with our immigration system: an unsecured border, unenforced laws, and a broken and slow legal immigration system. And amnesty won't work now for the same reasons. Let's not make the same mistake twice. Another amnesty would provide such a strong incentive, acting as a powerful gravitational pull, forcing yet another debate on this issue in the decades to come. I don't know about you, but I would rather not be here 30 years from now discussing this issue again. And none of the underlying issues will have been resolved. Amnesty is also unfair. It is unfair to American citizens, who we are required to follow the law. It's also unfair to those who want to come here legally. Currently, there are 4.3 million people waiting in line to come to the United States legally, and many of them will wait in that line for years. Amnesty rewards unlawful immigration and punishes legal immigration. So what should we do? That's why we're here. What does the ideal system look like? The Heritage Foundation has done research on this, and we think that incremental approach should start with, we should look at raising the caps on immigration, but to do so in a way that focuses our efforts on individuals who have higher levels of skill and higher levels of education. In 2012, we gave out about 1 million green cards for legal permanent residency. Of those 1 million green cards, only 14% were given out to individuals based on skill, education, or job opportunity. That's a paltry number. America would benefit if we doubled, tripled, or even considered removing the cap on those workers who are highly skilled or highly educated, are businessmen who want to come and invest in America and create jobs. We should be looking for ways to make it easier for the best and the brightest from around the world to come to the United States and grow our economy. There is, however, also a need for lower skilled workers. So the question for us as policymakers and people who are interested in the issue is, how do we avoid the welfare trap? Conservatives would say, let's have a dynamic and easy to use temporary worker program that is truly temporary. One solution put forward by the Rupe Foundation, for example, is called the red card solution, and it would allow businesses to essentially provide what is essentially a work visa to foreign individuals to come to the United States and work for the duration of their work with that company. An effective temporary worker program effectively harnesses the free movement of labor while not harming the United States' fiscal health and also reducing the incentive for illegal immigration in the first place. Given that there is some need for our limits on immigration, there's also a need for border security and interior enforcement. There are cost-effective ways for the United States to secure its borders, not only from unlawful immigrants, but also from drug cartels and terrorists. More technology along the border, more cooperation with state and local governments. These are a few of these solutions. One which I'll go into a little bit more specifically is we need to cooperate more with Mexico. We need to work with Mexico to combat the violence, the corruption, and establish the rule of law, economic freedom, and civil society in Mexico. After all, border security can only do so much. We only control 1/2 of the border. Having a good, firm partner in Mexico will help stop illegal immigration and the movement of drug cartels before they ever even reach the US border. We can also improve the enforcement of our immigration laws through programs like the 287G program, which essentially trains and uses state and local law enforcement officers and has them help in the enforcement of federal immigration law. But most importantly, and this is the first thing which must be done, we need a president who will faithfully and not selectively enforce the law. Immigration reform demands commitment to the law and to its enforcement, and it demands it from the White House, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Homeland Security. I've tried to describe a few of the solutions, a few of the key avenues about how we get from where we are today to a more ideal system. Positive reform is possible. Considered incrementally, we can move forward to mend a broken system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Henrik?
This is on, yeah. Well, Eric, first of all, thanks a lot for the introduction. Can you all hear me?
Oh, yeah.
As Eric mentioned in his introduction, I used to be a platoon commander in the Danish army, so I'm not used to the microphone when I speak to a group. But thanks very much for the introduction. Thank you, David, for your comments. And I want to start this off by saying, you know, it's conservative and libertarian tonight. Last time I was at an AFF debate, I was the conservative. It was a different issue. So sometimes I wear the libertarian hat, sometimes the conservative hat, and sometimes the classical liberal hat. In Denmark, I was with the Liberal Party. But that actually, I think, underlines the value of the AFF, that we're all friends here and we're having friendly debates, and it's about finding a common ground as much as about staking out opposing positions. Now, when I first visited the United States in 1998, one of my first experiences on American soil was actually sitting down with Robert Rector at the Heritage Foundation. And I have since leaned a lot on his work when I debate social conditions and poverty and other issues in the United States with my European friends. So I also want to thank the Heritage Foundation for all the great work that you do. I disagree with some of it, which we'll get into in a little bit. So I want to approach the debate on immigration as an immigrant. But I want to premise that by saying I approach every policy issue, not just immigration, as an immigrant. I am an American, and I'm very proud today to have a blue passport with a nice big eagle on it, because I think this country is truly special. I believe in American exceptionalism, even though that may be a politically incorrect term these days. I also believe in a bright future for the United States, which is also not in fashion. And I think that is rooted in some enduring advantages that the United States has had ever since its founding. And those are basically three pillars of American exceptionalism. It's capitalism, it's idealism, and it's federalism. And whenever I analyze a policy issue, I look at, will this policy advance capitalism, will it advance idealism, and will it advance federalism? Because those are the true pillars of American strength and what makes America a very unique society. So even though you can look at short-term economic benefits or various effects of policies, I think you always need to have your long-term cap on and look at the effects on these particular pillars of American strength. So I take an institutional approach, if you will, and a long-term approach to most policy issues. Now, what I mean by these three terms, capitalism, and here I have a little bit of an issue with the Heritage Foundation, actually. They publish the Index of Economic Freedom every year, where Denmark, which has a marginal tax rate in the 50s and actually in the 60s if you count everything, ranks higher in economic freedom than the United States. And I've never understood why that is. We can get into a side discussion on that. But I truly believe that the United States is the freest country from an economic point of view in the world. And you know, you can debate individual tax rates versus Hong Kong or Singapore and so on, but there's more to freedom than that. It's the vastness of the American market. It's the opportunities you have here to move from one end of the country to another overnight, start a new business, and immediately sell to, you know, more than 300 million consumers without any trade restrictions. There's a huge internal market. And that has always been an advantage for the United States. Idealism, and you know, from its very founding, this was a very idealistic country. So it's not a hedonistic capitalism, if you will. I think most Americans are brought up with the attitude that you are here not just to pass time, you're here to do something with that time. You are here to improve yourself, and you're here to improve life for your neighbors and improve society. And that is an extremely idealistic attitude compared to most of the world, where you're either locked into a class system from the moment you're born, or you are you know, stuck in a economic structure that's slow. You know, you don't have access to these 300 million people to cooperate with. And it tends to be that advantages or disadvantages you were born with are not things you can do much about. The United States, from its very founding, has been the place where people came to remake their lives, and where anyone, no matter what disadvantages they were born with, could rise to the top of society. Abraham Lincoln is the prime example. You know, I live in Springfield, in Abraham Lincoln's hometown, so I make it a principle to always mention him in any presentation I give. But I think he truly epitomizes, you know, what America stands for. And his, you know, if you look at his rhetoric, you know, the Lincoln-Douglas debates and so on, it was very clear that it was, you know, every American's fair chance in life. You know, the ability for everyone to have the opportunities he had for self-driven mobility, that were the key to his view on, you know, union, on slavery, all the issues he dealt with as president. And then, of course, the third advantage the United States has, and has had since its founding, has been federalism. And by federalism, you know, today the federalism debate is about the proper balance between DC and the states. And that's one important aspect of federalism. The other one is, and you know, we sometimes forget this today, but the reason people started talking about federalism was to make sure that the 13, you know, at that point, independent states could stick together and be one country that other powers around the world could not just push around and play out against each other. So it was national unity. And the ability of the United States to be a global leader with a global mission. And since then, you know, with the conquest and the economic development of the whole continent, the United States has been able to play that role, and I think that's been for the good of the world. Now, how do all these things relate to immigration? Well, if you look at capitalism, my view is we should have as many immigrants as possible. It's brains that drive the economy today. It's sort of like saying, you know, there are these 4 million people and many millions more that want to come here. But we want to have quotas on them, we want to limit their ability to come here, you know, we want to stop them at the border. It's sort of like saying there's all this oil in the ground, but we're not going to dig for it or drill for it. You know, we have all these natural resources. Normally, on our side of the political spectrum, we tend to agree that we want to, you know, take our natural resources and turn them into positive economic growth. But somehow we don't view human beings and brains in the same way. even though, in my view, they're the most valuable resources we have, especially in today's knowledge economy. So, you know, I think there's no doubt that, you know, David mentioned, you know, highly skilled workers and so on. I think we agree, you know, remove the caps there, let them in and create economic growth. So I think it's pretty clear that, you know, allowing for large amounts of immigrants will certainly boost the capitalist system. As I mentioned, you know, it's the vastness of the American market that makes us the most capitalistic country in the world. Idealism is the other important point. It's the immigrants that come here that every day we see coming from some of the poorest areas in the world, or giving up privileged lives in rich countries because they want to come here and make it on their own and remake who they are. They are the ones that every day illustrate to every American that we are still the country where you can come and make something of yourself. And I think that is a cultural impact that is extremely important, that you have neighbors like that are from somewhere else. And actually, you know, one part of this is a lot of Americans are immigrants in their own country because they were born in California and they moved to Texas. Or born in Illinois and moved to Texas. And, you know, I think that kind of dynamic where you see people lifting themselves up and defining themselves in a, you know, staking out who they are regardless of what they were born with is an extremely important cultural effect. Now, I think cultural conservatives and social conservatives should value and embrace. And that's aside from any sort of issues around security or economics and so on. There's a cultural effect that you could call a, you know, in economic terms, a positive externality that's not counted into all these equations when we discuss costs and benefits of immigration. And then in terms of federalism, again, there are two aspects of it. There's the states versus DC, and there's the US role as a global power, both of which I think are extremely important. Immigration. Now, who are the most mobile people in the workforce in the United States? It's immigrants, because they're not tied down in any one place. They tend to move where the jobs are. That's, you know, if you're coming from abroad, you don't have any prejudice about where you're going to go. You're going to go where you can have the best life, the best career, and so on. Which means a huge influx of immigrants tends to reinforce the positive effects of states competing against each other. I mean, look at Houston, look at Austin. You know, Texas as a state, you know, probably one of the most market-friendly, libertarian, conservative states in the nation. Well, that's where the immigrants are going, which means Texas benefits from a huge influx of immigrants. Other states are, you know, in relative decline and are punished for having anti-business policies. So immigration reinforces those benefits of federalism. Plus, you know, when Americans want to do business abroad, or when we engage in diplomacy abroad, I often say, well, we have a built-in advantage in the global market, because if you're going to do business in China or in India, where do you go to hire the most talented Chinese or the most talented Indians? Right down the street. So when we attract the most talented people from around the world, we're able to engage in a much more effective way in international trade, international diplomacy, and so on than other countries are. And I think my time was up. Is that right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Listened to your presentation with great interest. I'm not sure we disagree on too much. We have a lot in common. Importantly, we agree that the system's broken and the status quo is not doing the right job. It is not bringing in immigrants in the way that it needs to. It is not encouraging immigrants to come to the United States. It is not making it easy for the families and these individuals. And that's something which we certainly agree needs to change. And this is especially the case for high-skilled workers, and that's definitely a point of commonality, a common ground that we can find in this debate. When it comes to high-skilled workers, we see that there is clear economic benefit. They are going to work hard. They're going to provide skills, whether it be doctors, engineers, scientists. They're going to provide great value to our economy. They're going to provide brains, as Henrik put it. They're going to provide the needed material that we need as a country to get ahead and to thrive in the 21st century. That is certainly the case. I guess the issue probably comes in what do we do about lower levels of lower skilled immigrants? What do we do with them? As I said, in theory, economic freedom is the way to go. We believe that the free movement of labor is important. It is one of the things measured in the Index of Economic Freedom, which we can talk about later. It is something which is very important, and that's why we do want to take advantage of the free movement of labor through things like a temporary worker program, because we think that allowing businesses to have access to that labor, allowing businesses to be able to get the cheapest labor that can do the best work, that's what businesses need. So we should certainly be incentivizing and creating the opportunity for that. But the reason why at the Heritage Foundation we would say that there needs to be some restriction on the immigration of lower skilled and lower educated immigrants is that despite their best intentions, and I agree with former Governor Jeb Bush that many of them actually came here with great intentions, maybe even intentions of love and love for their family and a desire to feed their families. Indeed. However, that does not mean that those intentions don't end up resulting in harm to our fiscal health. We have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. We have programs which are already unsustainable. Welfare programs, both at the federal and the state levels, which are at highest levels they've ever been. And so the question is whether these individuals intend to end up on these systems or not, which I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I believe that many come here to work hard to get ahead. I truly believe that. However, our welfare system is one that keeps people down. It traps people. You don't need to look any further than the inner cities of America to see how our war on poverty has gone over the past 50 years. We've spent $20 trillion, and the poverty rate is essentially unchanged since 1965. So the question isn't the intention. The question isn't what outlook they bring. They can have the best outlook in the world, but when our system is set up in such a way that it necessarily traps most of these individuals in welfare system that discourages success, then that requires that we set policy that is sensible and rational, that looks at ways, how do we protect our fiscal health? How do we protect these programs which already need our dire need of reform? So that's where I think the disagreement between us will be. But I think it's important that we have this debate because we, as a population, it's important that we examine these issues. We all have to become informed, and this forum right now is a great venue for having the interchange of ideas, interaction with all y'all here today as well. So I want to stress that we have to listen to both sides. I'm glad to be here with Henrik and listening to his arguments, responding to them, and him doing the same with my arguments, because we have to be critical users and interactors with the debates that are in front of us. And so this also makes it so that we don't demonize our opponents. I'm not going to be called, I'm confident that no one here is going to call me a racist for suggesting that we have some sort of cap on immigration. Rational discussion is important. I'm glad we're having this. Our research is an attempt to find the facts. Heritage research is an attempt to find the facts and then, armed with those facts, to let our values of free markets, of the free movement of labor, to allow those values to guide us armed with those facts. And so we have to trust our common sense, trust our reason, and let it lead us to common ground. This issue can be resolved, and it's an issue where as a nation, which is a beacon of freedom, hope, and opportunity, where we can succeed, but only if we have the wisdom and the will to make the system rational, workable, and fair.
Well, I'll work hard here to try to get some disagreement going. So I'm going to try to address sort of, with the basis in my comments earlier, where I think the disagreements are, and then we can try to sort of go at it. And otherwise, we'll take it out in the backyard afterwards. But One issue is obviously the security issue. And I think a lot of the politics around immigration right now is driven by this, and a lot of this on the Republican side, that somehow the borders are completely insecure, and until we get that fixed, we can't even talk about immigration reform. And to me, they're just completely separate issues. I don't understand why we would cut ourselves off from all the benefits of immigration, because we also happen to have a problem with lax border security. And I don't even know how lax it is, but clearly people are able to come in, and among those people there could obviously be terrorists and there are criminals. So it's an issue. I just see it as a separate problem from the whole immigration debate. So I guess my first point of criticism I have with a lot of conservatives in this debate and the Republican Party is this insistence on having to fix the borders and build walls and or come up with smarter ways of solving the legitimate security issues before we even start talking about immigration. I think they should be two separate tracks, and we should move the ball forward on both tracks at the same time, but they don't need to be related to each other in some comprehensive solution. So that would be my point number one. And then, on that too, I'd just like to remark that, one effective way, I think, of finding out or limiting some of the security issues would be to make it much easier to come in the country legally, because that way it's only going to be the criminals that are going to continue passing in and out of the country illegally, and that way you know who they are. It's a lot easier to target people that way. So just from a security point of view, I actually think it would boost security if we had a liberalization of the immigration rules, regardless of what we do in terms of technology or soldiers on the border or anything like that. Then on the long-term fiscal costs, I agree there's obviously a problem with people coming in, taking advantage of welfare benefits and so on. When I used to live out in the Washington, D.C. area, and my wife was very active in a local taxpayer organization. And so we went to a city hall meeting to be part of a debate on some tax issues, but they started off this city hall meeting with a community organizer who brought in a group of immigrants to thank the city council for the grant they had gotten to paint murals on some of the public housing walls, talk about social justice. And I think that is a crime to welcome immigrants in that way, with a community organizer. It's the worst person they can meet. The first person they should meet would be an entrepreneur who would hire them and give them a chance, instead of a community organizer who's going to hold them down. So I agree with a lot of the concerns, that Heritage and others have there. But I guess and you can always run this, all these economic models. The CBO has some, Heritage has others, and it's, with these things, I tend to, I'm from the Austrian School of Economics, if people are familiar with that, so I tend to be very skeptical of statistical models. And to me, it's the entrepreneurs that drive the economy. And if I have 50 welfare benefits and one founder of an S&P 500 company, I take the 50 welfare recipients plus him, rather than keep all of them out. 40% of the companies in the S&P 500 were founded by immigrants or their immediate descendants. And I just think things like that are not calculated in these models when we talk about cost and benefits of immigration. And as I mentioned, there are long-term issues. So it may be that there are certain first-generation immigrants that become net takers in terms of benefits. But we should also think about their kids and their kids and their kids and their kids that would not have been here if the first generation had not come in. And I do think that, as I said, I'm against abuse of the welfare system. I'm against all the community organizing. But even if that's the case, we're not doomed to have all the subsequent generations trapped in poverty. And I guess the other, I think it's somewhat pessimistic to say we need to cut ourselves off from all the potential benefits of increased immigration until we fix the welfare system. That's sort of like the security debate. We need to fix the security before we can talk immigration. And to me, it's like, you know, well, let's open up for immigration and then let's work on this welfare system at the same time and getting the necessary reforms in place. So
what I want to do now is move to questions, because I think that'll be the best way to probe some of these ideas. So hold on. Clearly we have people eager to ask questions, which is great. Which is exactly what we want. I'm going to say this lovingly. Questions and in question marks. So we will do a question and answer, not soliloquy and response. I'm sure you have a very interesting life story, and we'd love to hear about it after the debate. So please get as quickly to your question as possible. I'm going to invoke my privilege as moderator before calling on the first question to ask one of David, because it just piqued my interest. Henrik just touched on this. So you argued that we should restrict immigration because Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare are problems, they're exploding. I think we can agree that these are terrible public policy choices that we have made, and they're problems we have to confront anyway. It seems to me the same argument as Obamacare, that because insurance is so bad, because people go into emergency rooms and get care and it becomes expensive, well, we have to go with Obamacare now. Why should immigrants have to bear the cost of our poor public policy decisions by them not being able to come here to build a better life?
That's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Thank you.
I would say to that. I would say that while there's certainly an element of we don't want to penalize them for our mistakes, but at the same time it's the reality of the situation. If we say that we want, just because we don't want to penalize immigrants for our mistakes, that doesn't make taking that public policy option, that doesn't make it any better. And so what we would ideally like to do is to, yes, reform the welfare system, yes, reform border security, but these things, as Henrik pointed out, we can do many of these things at the same time. We don't have to do one and not the other. The only thing which is really important that I would say, the only sort of dividing issue that can't be done right off the bat, I would say is amnesty, because amnesty incentivizes more legal immigration and breaks down the other pillars of reform. But fixing our legal immigration system, fixing border security, fixing enforcement, fixing our welfare system, these are all things which we can do and should do right away, straight away. And that way, the time that we spend penalizing unskilled immigrants, and mind you, they will, what I propose, they could still use a temporary worker program and get here and get access to those jobs, and then hopefully become green card holder citizens as they move through the system, which we will fix.
All right, please speak loudly when I call on you.
Thank you. Vince Colbert, candidate for the 5th Congressional District here in Chicago. So I'm a little bit surprised at Heritage talking about, oh, we have to deal with this low-skilled worker question. I'm a product of immigrants who came here who had low skills 100 years ago. And through several generations now, I've been able to improve on prior generations. So I'm a little bit surprised hearing from Heritage, which is all it should be, if I thought of it, and I'm a big supporter of Heritage. Not talking about the central government saying that someone's high-skilled or low-skilled. To me, that's what the Democrats, that's what the very liberals say. They want to pick and choose. They want to get into, you got this high degree. Yeah, we want them, clearly, But then saying, well, low-skilled, no, we don't need them. We don't value them. We don't want them. Please respond.
Sure thing. I'll just say that my great-grandparents came here about 100 years ago from Sicily. Great-grandfather opened up a barbershop in Brooklyn, New York, provided well for his family. My grandfather went to college. My father then went to college. Certainly, there's a history of America being a nation of immigrants. But this gets to the problem which even economists like Milton Friedman pointed out. In the past, we had free immigration to jobs. If you came here in 1900 and didn't succeed, you fell back on family and you worked harder because that was the only option. If you come here today and you don't get ahead, you fail, well, there's a generous welfare state waiting for you, and it will gladly take you and add you to the roles of individuals who are dependent on government, whether you mean to be or not. In most cases, you don't want to be, but you are now dependent on government, and you are becoming a consumer of tax dollars rather than a fruitful contributor to our economy. And so I completely agree. The more idealized system would be a system where we could have something more akin to what we had back in the 1900s, or the early 1900s, excuse me. But that's a system which we don't have today. And so to apply the same policy solutions to a different time with different circumstances, I don't think is wise.
Yeah, you want to add anything?
Yeah, just 2 points. So, I completely agree. We shouldn't divide people up based on their education level. I think there's a self-selection in terms of the ambition level. It takes a certain level of ambition to leave where you came from, especially if you're low skilled. You don't speak English. The risk that you're running, if you're a poor farmer in Guatemala and you travel up here and even if you enter illegally, I don't promote illegal behavior, but I have to say, someone who goes through that whole trip and takes the initiative to come in here really wants to come here. So and has shown a lot of initiative. That's already 2 aspects of a very good American. That they broke the law, that's not so good. But when it comes to, and it goes back to I think what will become the key disagreement in this debate probably is the amnesty issue. True, if you grant amnesty, you're going to somehow encourage more illegal behavior. I think the more fundamental question is, should this have been illegal behavior in the first place? Look at prohibition. Would we be in favor of deporting everyone who had a drink during prohibition, or would we grant them amnesty? I'm a big believer in the rule of law. I also believe in what Winston Churchill said, that if you make 10,000 regulations, you undermine the rule of law. And I think that's what we're dealing with in the current immigration system.
I think that we're, Henrik talked a little bit about sort of the security on the border and conservative thinking, that's such a major part of the argument, the amnesty piece. And I think we should address the fact that, and I want to get responses, but we should address the fact that we're underestimating how many people that do come across the border that are not, acting best, in terms of our society. So, what I mean by that is, if you look a couple of days ago, right, in the news, I think it was, ICE released 36,000 illegal immigrant criminals, right, back into the system, essentially. So, help me understand how we can respond to that part.
Sure. No, sure. There are criminals that come across the border, but there are many more good, decent people that come across. And my argument is simply that if you make it easier, it's a little bit like gun control, right? If you outlaw guns, you're going to have the outlaws carry all the guns. In this case, what's happening is you're putting a lot of people that are decent people into an underground black market that benefits who? Benefits drug dealers, human smugglers, the underground people. So if you take, if you liberalize the rules, you're going to undermine that underground economy, and it's going to be the illegals crossing the border illegally. Everyone else is going to do it the right way. So I just think from a security point of view, I'm in complete agreement with you that we need to watch this, we need to watch who's coming into the country. I just simply think liberalizing the immigration rules is one of the most effective ways we can do exactly that.
Yes, yeah, you respond.
Just a quick extra comment on that. I think both of us are talking about liberalizing the system. It's a question to the degree to which we want to liberalize it. I want to see an effective temporary worker program, for instance, which will decrease the incentive for people to cross illegally because there will be a legal method to enter the United States and get a job. It will also help with the security aspect because there will be less, because we will have more known channels by which people enter the United States. But I believe that a temporary worker program also protects America's fiscal health. So we're both talking about liberalizing the system. It's just a question of to what degree and how much.
Also, if, when I call on you, if you could stand so that we can hear you better. Back there.
It seems like one of the major goals of the amnesty supporters and the proponents of unskilled immigration is to create millions of Democrat voters. And I'm just wondering what you all have studied on the patterns of unskilled workers and how they vote and what effect that would have on liberty and capitalism, having all those Democrat voters.
I'll just quickly say that the Heritage Foundation is a non-profit organization, so the IRS is nonpartisan and nonprofit, and since this is televised and the IRS is probably watching.
Well, and the NSA is listening. So
I'm not able to fully answer your question. I think we're all able to see some of the political motivations behind the two parties, but I'll let you be the judge of that, and maybe Henrik can be a little more free to comment on this.
Yes, I'm a business owner, so we'll see if I can get order of it. I mean, I turn it around and say, you know, there's a lot of new voters here that are up for grasp, and you know, you're going to grasp them or not. Why would Republicans be so idiotic as to push all these people away with disparaging comments sometimes, you know, about their ability to succeed or, you know, being welcome in the United States? I think it is a huge political opportunity for the Republican Party to create more Republican voters. It's up to the parties. Right now, the Democrats are winning that debate because they're the ones that are seen as pro-immigrant. And actually, when you look at, I mean, the Democratic Party, the labor movement, they're against immigrants. They're against free competition in the labor movement. So it's mind-boggling to me that Democrats are winning this debate right now. And there's a huge opportunity for Republicans politically to drive a wedge in the Democratic Party on this issue. But they're stuck in this old-fashioned mindset, you know, which is sort of the you know, what I call the rule of law mindset on the amnesty issue, where, you know, I actually think that all the regulations undermine the rule of law. But it's this, you know, we must be tough on crime attitude, which I think hurts the Republican Party. So I'm with Jeb Bush on this. Focus on the law.
Could I just respond to that real quick? An unskilled person, are they going to be more interested in the Bill of Rights or in free stuff being dangled before them by Democrats?
They want the job.
So let's go to Jeff in the back there.
All right, so I think that the parallel to healthcare is kind of interesting because Heritage has argued against employer-sponsored healthcare, right, as a something that's a vestige of the old system. And so what I'm wondering about is this red card. It seems like if it's employer-sponsored and it's only for the tenure when somebody's employed, wouldn't you be creating the same paradigm with immigration status instead of healthcare?
Indeed. So let me just say that that's just one solution that that is put forward by the Rupe Foundation. It is arguably one of the most cohesive solutions that's been presented in terms of what a temporary worker program should look like. But there are other ways to do a temporary worker program. I think the power of moving it out of the government, though, is that it can be more responsive to the needs of businesses. If the government has to, approve all the visas, we know how long that can take. Anyone who's who's dealt with the U.S. immigration system here knows what I'm talking about. So that's part of the reason is to try to move it out of government, move it to the private sector where they can say, I've got a job, I need it filled. I know there are people who will come fill it, let's bring them in. So that's part of it, but there, as you point out, it's not a perfect system, but it's a system. It's an idea from which we can start a debate about how to make that policy work. But your point is a good one.
So I'm concerned, or just interested in your opinion on the gray zone. So specifically, is secure communities people who come here illegally and then do something illegal. Say they drive home from a party, get a felony DUI, have gotten rid of their last carry gun, and then are sort of in this purgatory of not being able to send back, but can't be here, can't continue on with citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, it's a tough issue, what's the punishment for breaking law in the United States if you're not an American citizen? I think for certain, real crimes, I think it's appropriate to say, instead of having Americans, taxpayers pay for a prison time, we're gonna send this burden out of the country. So in that case, you want a system that gets them out of there. There'll obviously sometimes be issues around, what's going to happen to them when they get to where they're sent to. We need a system for that. But I think that the bottom line for me is, there's also a lot of victimless crimes up. I think people get caught up in the system. And there, I would basically favor the system that was more or less equal for native-born Americans and immigrants. So I divided up that way.
I would just say that on that issue, I generally agree that there's a need for some mercy if there's some minor offense. There needs to be some mercy. On the other hand, there's usually an agreement by the immigrant when they've come to the United States. Same way we would sign a contract with the business to show there's understood rules of the road. And when an individual breaks those rules, especially when you mentioned, I would say maybe gun possession or DUIs, that's potential harm to existing American citizens as well as other immigrants. And so I do think that the laws need to be applied, but there is definitely room for crimes that perhaps the word is victimless, crimes of less severity, and there probably should be some mercy involved there.
Yes. This is Rupe Inserra mainly. It seems like with low-skilled labor, you basically want to move away from permanent migration more towards sort of like guest worker programs. But in fact, what do you think about sort of like the social and cultural aspects of that? I think one of the biggest successes of the American immigration system is our ability to sort of integrate immigrant groups into our country. But I think if we move towards more of a guest worker system, and you sort of concerned about the effects that'll have on sort of the social integration of those immigrants or migrants.
Sure. So let me just say that a temporary worker program isn't the only solution. We still have, I guess I mentioned currently, I think it's about 66% of individuals get their green cards through family-based visas. While we want to increase the number that go to skilled individuals, business owners, and the like, there's still always going to be permanent immigration of individuals who are of lower skill or lower education, and that is always going to happen. And we are not advocating, shutting off and only going to a purely temporary system. But we do think that a temporary system is a way to take advantage, to more fully take advantage of low-skilled labor in the nation, and at the same time allow the social, the cultural, the naturalization process to occur for those people who are going to come here. It does still allow that process to continue, probably at a greater rate, to be honest, because if you have more skilled immigrants coming in, they're going to sponsor their family members for green cards. So you're probably going to have, if not, you may even have a slight uptick in lower skilled immigrants as a result of that. But once again, it's keeping with this current social and cultural tradition that the United States has.
One of the most important points that no one's discussing, as someone who's an immigrant or family from a family of immigrants, also very Hispanophile, I still have to point out the fact that the sheer numbers, because this is illegal and uncontrolled, the sheer flood of numbers has resulted in what is moving in the direction of a binational society, such as you see in Canada, with, you know, Spanish, a language that I love and speak, but it is becoming a kind of second language. This is not integration. We're no longer talking about assimilation and integration. I have no problem with Hispanic people coming and integrating like all other groups. I'm worried about building and creating a dual nation situation in our country because it's not controlled. So I'd like to hear your views.
I mean, in every period of American history, there's been new waves of immigrants that built parallel societies. That's what immigration is. So when you're an immigrant, especially, you know, if you don't know the language where you're moving, you don't know the culture there, you might not have a big, you know, fancy fortune or education or anything like that, and you're starting from scratch. Well, of course, you're going to settle where there are people that speak the language you speak, you know, where people can help you get started. So I guess I'm not worried about that, what I consider a natural dynamic of immigrants settling where other immigrants from a similar background have settled. I consider myself fully integrated in the United States. Whenever I am with other Danish immigrants, there's a special connection immediately in terms of trust, because it's just, you cannot replicate that similar background that, you know, we both grew up in Denmark, we speak Danish, and we both made the choice of becoming Americans. It's just, it's very rare that you can connect with people at that level. So I think there's a natural trust in what some people choose to call ghettos or you know, colonies of immigrants, that is actually just civil society at its best. It's people helping people. And so I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with you know, Spanish or Arab or English being spoken in certain parts of town. Where I get the problem is when all of a sudden you know, you have a right to communicate in Spanish with the government, or you know, things like that. But in terms of, you know, immigrants putting a cultural imprint and settling together in enclaves and so on, I think that's healthy, and it just helps people get settled.
I'll just say real fast that I think while there's definitely some truth to that, there's always going to be enclaves that immigrants are going to settle around other immigrants they're similar to, and there's a special connection there. It's definitely true. I think there's an important point that you're getting at here, which is that there are really illegal immigrant advocacy groups, which essentially advocate for something which is not what we currently know America as. It's no enforcement of the laws. It's, you know, no southern border. Allow as many benefits as we want to be given to these individuals. And I think there is a difference here. When for instance, I mentioned my great-grandparents before. My grandfather did not learn Italian. 2 parents from Sicily. My grandfather did not learn Italian, and it wasn't until he was around 70 years old and just retired and wanted to travel to Italy that he finally learned Italian. Despite growing up in Brooklyn, to the most Italian, you know, great-grandmother that, you know, that's mom. So I think there's a little bit different aspect going on, because before I think there was, while there's definitely settling in enclaves, there's definitely an element here where there's a sense of a separate cultural identity. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily completely pervasive, and there's plenty of great Hispanic and Latino people who are definitely trying to integrate into the United States, but there is this, I think, what is a unique element here of groups like La Raza or other organizations, which are really after something different than what we've known America as.
All the way back.
I have a question about healthcare and Social Security. I have a question about healthcare and Social Security. Everybody here?
Yep.
All right. We complain about immigrants being bothered about it, that they take away from it and so on, but these are the same illegal immigrants that pay into a system and will probably not cash out at the end of it. They will not receive benefits. So how do we go about fixing that problem? What do we do in terms of that, and how will the temporary working program even address these issues?
Sure. So right now, a lot of unlawful immigrants currently, as you are sort of pointing out, they do pay some in taxes. But however, those taxes are mostly going, I'll say, money those taxes don't even cover the basic services such as police, fire, transportation, basic medical service, and other advantages which you still have access to through state-level welfare programs and other types of things. So as it is, current unlawful immigrants are actually right now, they are net tax consumers right now. So they are already getting benefit. And since most of them are off the books, they aren't actually paying, they're not paying Social Security, Medicare, or FICA taxes in many cases. So they're not losing out on those future benefits. If anything, they get to take advantage of a privatized Social Security system, which they can take their own money, and if they want, they could send it back to their country, or put it somewhere where they think they can better invest those funds. So in some ways, they actually have it a little bit better because they get the liberty of doing what they want with their own money, but they do not get the advantage. They're not being gypped in this regard because most of them are not paying FICA tax and Social Security.
This is not true. 80% of illegal immigrants pay taxes.
Excuse me.
You're right.
Excuse me.
More than $200 million paid by people that have state security numbers.
Excuse me. If you want to, excuse me. We're going to try to have a orderly conversation here, which doesn't involve shouting at people. So we're going to, Henrik, if you want to add anything to that. If not, we're going to take another question.
I'll tempt faith here. So 2 points on that. One, again, I would just reiterate that the challenge here is not so much the immigration part. The challenge is the welfare state. So let's focus on privatizing pensions and privatizing healthcare. And then we'll work out the immigration issues related to this. But I think instead of spending all our energy, mixing these issues, let's split them up and force our political opponents to split them up too. That's point number one. And point number two, are people paying more into the system than they're receiving? I'm also a believer in taxation minimization. And I don't think that necessarily a bad thing. So, we can discuss, the fairness in who pays what in taxes, but I am not against people paying very little in taxes.
Okay.
Well, I disagree that the two issues with, immigration reform and securing our borders are separate. Mr. Robert, I think in the last one I attended, put it perfectly. We have made legal immigration very hard and illegal immigration very easy. Now, you said that there's 12 million legal immigrants currently in the States. They have no way of becoming legal, is that correct? And then you say when they fail, our social system, it's more than willing to take them in and they overwhelm the system. Now, did any of your studies find out whether the reason is that it is so much easier to get social welfare than it is to become legal? And if you really want to find out whether or not that's the case, you can do a study with, right now, Illinois providing licenses for legal immigrants. They have overwhelmed the system. You have to wait 6 months in some cases to get an appointment. So these are people that really want the opportunity to follow the law. And once they do get their driver's license, are they going on and buying car insurance and doing more to follow the law? I mean, have you?
So your question is trying to get at right now it is harder essentially to come here. It is hard to come here legally, and it would make it easier it's easier to come illegally. And I will say though that things like driver's license for illegal immigrants, things like generous welfare benefits that certain states, like in-state tuition, for example, for illegal immigrants, that does make it easier. It does incentivize more legal immigration. So when we're talking about how do we fix the situation, we should certainly be making it much easier for people to come here legally. There's agreement on that the system needs liberalization in general. definitely in agreement on that.
Yeah.
However, when we make it easier for an unlawful immigrant to come to the United States and to take part in the welfare system or to have a driver's license, that encourages more of them because they can say, look, if I come here, I can get in-state tuition, I can get a driver's license, I can participate in the system, even though I came here illegally. So the question is creating the right incentives.
But you make it sound like as if they come here for that purpose only when, in fact, they want to get a job, or most of them want to get a job. And the best argument you have about these people is that they're coming and they're overwhelming our social system, when that's not really the reason they're coming in. That's just simply a cause to some, basically an effect to some other cause.
I'll just say real fast, and then I'll let Henrik respond. I agree, and I tried to say this in my remarks, I think I agree with Jeb Bush that most come here with an intent to provide for their families, full stop. I agree that most people do. However, we do not, we have examples that are played out across our country of how people who are in disadvantaged situations, how the welfare system does pull them down into a trap. The term wasn't, I don't think it was this way, coined by conservative economists, but the welfare trap is a real thing, and we don't have to look very far to see its effects on our country.
So on the driver's licenses specifically, that's I guess where I fail to see how it's pulling people into a trap to give them a driver's license. I think it's giving them an opportunity to work as normal citizens in society rather than trapping them so they can't travel around. So I would disagree on the driver's licenses, that specific issue, and that's one where, obviously I agree with you. It incentivizes illegal immigration. Again, I think the problem is that immigration should not be illegal in the first place, and giving people the opportunity to drive around and optimize their way of making a living that way, I think is good at least.
So we're running low on time, and obviously we have a lot more questions than we're going to be able to get to. Henrik and David, after we're done, then we can stick around and talk to people and answer any questions that they may have. So I'm gonna ask one more. I'm gonna ask one more question. We'll take.
Yeah, come on. The
Well,
question
so I'm
that's
being,
on everybody's mind tonight.
I'm being dared.
Why'd you come here? Here's the deal. I came here tonight, like I told David before. I was expecting a fake, and I've got just that. The real question is this: with the whole immigration thing, when we talk about the real wealth of nations, it really is the ethnic proclivity of the people who founded the country is why people come here. It's not about GDP and garbage like that. Our wealth is our community. And what I want to ask you guys is like after you go home tonight, you go back to your rich white neighborhood. What happens when there's none of that left? And all we've got is the poverty of all these third world countries and the product of their cultures and their religions and their hatred and their frustrations.
All right, that's enough. That's enough.
What then? What then? But that's the reality. I mean, you're going back to the Gold Coast, so am I. Why?
Can I, real quick?
No, sorry. We're going to let...
That's political correctness is what is ruining this debate. He's got a point.
Yeah.
She's got a point. But she can say,
yeah, Henrik, why do people emigrate to Denmark and UK and,
all right.
and the United States and Australia, and nobody emigrates to
we've had an opportunity, we've given people an opportunity to ask questions, and so if you can actually ask a question, you're welcome to
I asked the question. What happens when there's no nice neighborhoods to go home to? What do you do then? What's your debate going to do then?
Let me try to answer this in a constructive way. So I actually agree with you that culture matters. I don't agree that ethnicity matters. I think it matters where you grow up. I mean, there are certain things I'm still dealing with that I'm trying to get rid of in my Danish heritage. Danes tend to be very humble and underplay themselves. And as a businessman here, I found out that's not the way things are done in the United States when you go into a sales pitch. So you constantly have to work on these things. So culture obviously matters. And there are obviously, immigrant populations that come from, hundreds of different cultures from around the world. They're all going to bring something different here. And there will be problems in each single one of those cultures that will, have some potential negative impact here. I just think the cultural richness that people bring, and the fact that it's people that actively choose to transform themselves by coming here, has an even more positive impact on American culture. And it's actually, American culture would not be American culture without a constant influx of immigrants. That has actually been the constant definer of American culture. That is, people with drive that come from all sorts of backgrounds that come here. That becomes the culture of the United States. So if we want to preserve the culture and the values that have made America America, we should encourage more immigration.
I think we'll end on some agreement here because, as I mentioned earlier, my great-grandparents were Sicilian, which means that they were sort of the low rung of the Italians, and the Italians were the new kids in the block at some point, and they were shunned. They were not thought of as true new Americans. So we are a nation of immigrants. We're a nation that's based on the rule of law. There are common principles about why people come to the United States, and we should be making it easier for people to come here legally. And so the question just is the degree to which we want to liberalize this system. But there's agreement here that we are a nation of immigrants and a nation that's based on certain key principles such as the rule of law.
I want to ask you one question before we go to your closing statements. So we've had to mention that there's somewhere around estimated 12 million people here, illegally, unlawfully, undocumented, however you would put it. Possibly more than that. So they're here. They don't seem to indicate that they're going to leave of their own accord. And I don't think the American people have the stomach for the kind of police action that would be necessary to forcibly round them up and deport them. So what do we do? You said, amnesty is not a solution. We have all these people here. They're not going to leave. The American people won't stomach what's necessary to forcibly remove them. What do we do?
So I'll just say that there may come a point at which there need to be compassionate solutions for certain types of individuals, certain groups, through certain very specific means. However, the problem with going with any approach that starts with, which is amnesty-centric, which is most legislation, what most people talk about when they consider immigration. Sure, there's pieces of it, but eventually the whole idea is let's combine it in some big package around amnesty. Those policies all create greater incentives, just like they did in 1986, so that you can do more enforcement, you can do more border security, you can do all that stuff better. But if you provide amnesty, you're creating an immense incentive for more illegal immigration. Even the CBO, who rated the Senate bill and said, how many more illegal immigrants will we have as a result of this bill? They found that there would be 8 million unlawful immigrants within a decade. So we're going to provide amnesty to many people, and then in a decade, we're going to be close to the point where we are today and rediscussing this issue. That is not a constructive solution, especially if it's going to put these large fiscal costs on our nation and grow the size of government. So amnesty-centric solutions grow the size of government, bad for our fiscal health. They should come in certain specific tailored ways, linked secondary to the real reforms which need to happen, which is fixing enforcement, fixing our border, fixing the legal immigration system.
I think we should focus on the legal population that's here as a potential resource for the future of the United States and make it legal for them to become full participants in society. Where I think there could be a debate would be, and by the way, combine that with a liberalization of the immigration rules to encourage many more to come here. I think that would be the best solution, both in terms of economic security and maintaining our culture and rule of law. Where I tend to put more restrictions is who are you gonna open up citizenship for? There, I think we do need to have some standards. the English test I had to take when I applied for citizenship was a joke. I'll tell you, I walked in and I sit down with the USCIS officer, and he hands me this piece of paper, a very official government paper with everything on it. And there's one sentence on there. It says, George Washington was the first president. It says, sir, would you please read that? And I read the sentence, and he takes it, files it, stamps it, puts it away. And then I get a blank piece of paper, and he says, now please write what I say. It says, George Washington was the first president. I write it out, stamps it, that was the English test.
Wow. That's why this guy's so angry. That's why.
No, it's more than that, though. It's more than English test.
Stop! There was a civics test as well. It may have changed, but when I took the test, it was 100 possible questions, all of which you get in advance. On the day, you get 10 of those 100 possible ones, and you have to get 6 right. So I had my wife walk me through all 100 the night before I took the test. And I missed one. It was the number of amendments to the Constitution. So I always remember it's 27, not 26. But I think we could be more demanding when it comes to the civics test, the English test, other requirements, before we let people vote, before we let people run for office, and become part of the political decision making. And I think we need to look at higher standards there. But in terms of people coming here to work and actually start to learn the language, and start to learn more about civics and all of that, I think we should open it up, and I think we should keep the people that are here and encourage them to become full participants in the economy.
Great, so we'll have time for closing comments. First from David, and then from Henrik.
Sure. So I began by talking about common ground, and there are some places throughout this debate where we can see that the common ground does exist, and it can be used to unite Americans around solutions that really do embody our values and our culture. Sadly, the immigration debate has really turned into a battleground rather than a search for common ground, and we're seeing a little of that even here tonight. This important national debate is really, in some places, it's far worse than this. It's denigrating, it's falling into a perplexing and passionate struggle, a squabble that doesn't focus on the areas where we do agree, where we could actually make meaningful and important reforms that would make our nation better off. And so I don't think we have to let division be the last word here. There is a way forward. We just have to be bold enough to seize it, bold enough to come together on the issues that we do agree on, and take those options. Henrik and I have been talking about the need for a liberalization and and fixing the legal immigration system. We both agree, and an incremental step-by-step approach is the way to do it. Many of the things that Henrik has talked about can be incorporated into a framework that I have talked about. So we agree on many of these issues. So the question is, why don't we move forward on these issues? Rather than bundling everything together and focus and having essentially a debate over the things that we disagree about. In many cases, we disagree about them very strongly, and we would let those issues be the defining issues rather than the issues we agree on. In the end, policy needs to meet the needs of Americans and immigrants who want to come here. When we fail to find common ground, I'm worried about the skilled immigrant who wants to come here legally but can't. I worry about the unlawful immigrant who is pushed here by circumstances and then is stuck in a legal limbo. I worry about families, and I worry about the countless futures which are ruined by this system which is failing to do its job. So we need to restore sanity and security to this broken system. And it can be done. This is the time for our best leadership. This is the time for our best people to come forward. That's all of us. We need to come forward and rally around the ideas that we can agree on. We need leadership, vision, and compassion. And each one of you can be part of that. Each one of you can be a leader in moving this debate forward in a constructive manner. Each one of you can become a positive voice in the the creation of a new and better immigration system. Thank you.
This gets a little personal for me because I'm an American by choice. You know, I could have chosen a completely different life. I chose to come here. So I believe in the United States. I'm also a business owner. That also makes me an optimist because you have to be, otherwise you can't handle that mentally. So the optimist in me says, you know, ultimately, this whole discussion is about whether we believe in the strength of America. You know, do we believe that America is strong enough to integrate large amounts of immigrants, as it always has done? Do we believe that our culture is strong enough to be exposed to all sorts of impulses from around the world? Do we believe that individuals that come here, no matter whether they end up in the welfare system or they're low skilled or high skilled, but will eventually grow and succeed and have their offspring succeed? Do we believe in individuals? Do we believe in the American system and the American dream? And if the answer to that question is yes, we believe in the capacity of the United States, we believe in the exceptionalism of the United States, and we believe in the power of individuals to succeed, whether or not they are faced with problems in the short run, that long term, most people will lift themselves up and become better people. If we believe in all of that, then I think the answer to all these questions is yes, we want to make people that are here legal. Yes, we want to allow many more people to come here legally to succeed and to benefit from this very unique system that we have in this country.
I thank Henrik, Rasmussen, David, Inserra from the Heritage Foundation for a great debate. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank the Arthur and Rupe Foundation for sponsoring tonight's event. If anyone is not on the email list for America's Future Foundation, there is a sign-up sheet downstairs so you can get information about our upcoming events. We will have an event in June. We just do not have the topic ready to announce yet. But July 30th, again, we will have the economist Steve Horowitz from St. Lawrence University. We'll talk about public choice theory through the vehicle of the TV show House of Cards, which should be really fun, whether or not you're a fan of that program, which is excellent, by the way. So please stay tuned for that. I want to thank all of you for coming, and have a great evening.
Good to see you guys. All right, cool. Looking forward to it. All right. See ya.
Thank you.